You're listening to
They're going to call it a hard foul. They're going to call it a hard
foul. All right, we are back after going 2.5 months without a pod. We're 24 hours into it, and we got our next pod. This is Hard Foul. I'm Jim Quigley with my brother Mike, and we are brought to you by the what, Mike?
The Fan First Sports Network, bitch.
That's right. And as you guys probably know by now, the Celtics made a trade, sending out Anfernee Simons to the Chicago Bulls for Nikolai Vučević. I'm sorry. And there's the second round pick exchange in that as well. The move has not been officially announced yet, so you wonder if there's some pieces or if it gets dragged into a larger trade. So we'll keep an eye out for that. As always, you can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and we're on YouTube. We're asking you to please subscribe. That helps us out a lot if you subscribe and like our pod. But Mike, your initial thoughts on, I don't know if I call it a major move, a mid-major move, but a significant one nonetheless.
Yeah, it's a significant trade. Simons played really well for the Celtics this year. He answered some questions about the defense where he got a lot better. So he was really good while he was here. I do think it's a significant move, especially for next season where it opens up a $27 million trade exception for the Celtics and gets them under that first apron. So it does allow, if ownership wants to add next season if they want to go all in. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with that, if they use it, how they use it, and what they do in the off season. For this year, it is interesting. I think we've seen Nimi and Garza develop. So I hope it doesn't disrupt that. I know Scal was just on the radio now saying he thinks that there's going to be a 3-man big rotation that all three play. I'd be interested to see how that even works, but it's a good offensive player. He's shooting 50% from the field, 38% from three. Always been a pretty good rebounder. But I've never seen him as a good defender, so we'll see how he fits in. I wonder if he's good at screen and roll, and if he can open things up for Jalen Brown. We've seen him kill the Celtics from the outside, so he definitely stretches the floor. I do think the Celtics are lacking a ball handler. I do find it interesting that they put Sharman in the starting lineup last night. I wonder if they're going to have Pritchard now anchor that second unit with Simons gone, which isn't a terrible idea. And that also speaks to Brad's roster flexibility of having some good wings so they can do that. But yeah, overall, I don't love the trade. I don't hate it. I think maybe Vooch makes them a little bit better just because they needed a big. And is he the type of guy that at the end of the season, the Celtics can look at if things went well? Are you willing to be on an Al Horford type contract for the next 2 years as we chase a ring or not? Now that he's here, they have that option too. So, like I said, it could work out, especially with the flexibility it gives them for next season.
Yeah, no, it was an interesting move. I think everyone's initial reaction is, oh, this gets them below the first apron now, and a few million away from the tax. Maybe a Chris Boucher move away from the tax. So you are getting out of that repeater tax territory and potentially putting yourself in position to get to do that 2 seasons in a row to reset things, if that's important to ownership. And this move makes it feel like it probably is. I first want to just say, kind of echo, Anfernee Simons, when he was here, gave the team more than I thought he would. He really helped them out of jams when they weren't scoring at all. I think even just the last game against the Bucks, they're down 12-0. He comes in that first quarter and goes off, including hitting the buzzer beater sidestep three. and the Celtics take off from there. And he had a 29 point second half at one point, or first half, I forget. So he had his moments where he was
Yep.
really good. He came off the bench for the first time in his career, was a good soldier about that, contribute to winning. He is the type of guy that if you had on your team in the playoffs could win you a game. He could cost you too because of his defense and whatnot, but he could win you a game on the offensive end. So I don't want to minimize him at all, but I think also the reality of the situation with Simons was he was gone after this year. I don't think they would have paid the money necessary to keep him. Um, because I think we're looking probably plus 20 million range around there. That seems to be the going rate for guys like him. And I just don't think the Celtics, with the way their cap structure is right now, that he stays. Now, I would have liked to have seen them. We talked about this on the last pod. You asked me what I wanted in a trade. I wanted a guy that could protect the rim, rim defender, however you want to phrase it. This is not that. In fact, if it's hard to believe, but the Celtics might have got a little worse in that area with this move. Vučević is the worst rim defender in the league, according to all advanced metrics. Um, he's a guy that gets targeted to be put in space quite often. You look at a potential matchup versus the Knicks, and that has some nightmare scenarios written all over it, in my opinion. Um, but on the flip side of that, offensively, like I've heard some people kind of put out their tweet or whatever that him and Gaza give similar production. That's just not true. He's much, much better offensively. He's a 37 percent 3-point shooter, which isn't as good as Gaza, but he's a much better facilitator. He's much better in the post. He's a much better defensive rebounder. So that aspect of your defense will improve because he's much, much better than Gaza in that respect. Um, you mentioned Al Horford, the type of contract going forward, but there's actually similarities in the offensive game with Vucevic, not defensive game. That's what separates Horford. But in the offensive game, where you can facilitate some offense with him, the pick and pop stuff, when you run your Spain action, you can do a little bit of different things that you do with Gaza, maybe even advance that with Vucevic. So on that end, you definitely get better. And it's a type of guy that, you obviously saw how Tatum and Brown would play off of Horford, that Tatum and Brown would, offensively definitely have some success with. I think that goes without saying. As for how they use the centers, that's why Joe gets paid. The money gets paid. He'll figure it out. There'll probably be some DMPs in there for Gaza. I thought Scal brought up a great point on the telecast last night. This is by far and away the most minutes that Cater and Gaza have ever played. So you worry about their bodies breaking down. So maybe in some ways this move is going to be helpful to them. I imagine Vucevic will come off the bench, but we'll see about that. But I imagine that's how it will go. And I think if that's the case, he could really beat up some of these second units on the offensive end. And so I think from that respect, it's a good move. Offensively, defensively, you got worse, and he's not under contract, so and he's not young, so this isn't the type of center you kind of want to build around. Maybe you can fill out your roster with it on a mid-level deal for a year or two, but I do think that's risky with a guy at his advanced age. Um, and but maybe he comes in and he has a fire under his ass because he's never played on a contender before. So that's a element to this too. You mentioned Peyton Pritchard. He kind of said last night that he anticipates coming off the bench now because of the way the roster structure is. They really lack ball handlers with Simons gone. Keep an eye on that between now and Thursday. If they can pick somebody up, it's much needed. Um, and you always have the Tatum aspect of this kind of hanging out there. I know a lot of people weighed in thinking that this means he's coming back. I'm not sure if it means anything one way or the other. I think this is as much about getting another center on the roster and also cutting some salary as the priority of this deal. So that's my takeaway, Mike. I don't look today and say, oh gosh, I thought they were an Eastern Conference Finals team, now they're a Finals team, or I thought they were a second round team, now they're an Eastern Conference Finals team. I don't think it moves the needle like that at all. Um, if they got better, it's marginal, in my opinion. If they got worse, it's marginal. So, I significant players, some contract stuff, but beyond that, not much more.
Scouts was just on the radio before we hopped on. He was saying that he's 90% sure that Tatum is coming back. So I thought that was an interesting comment that he made. And I agree with you as far as this move wasn't made because Tatum is or isn't coming back. I think they needed a big for this year and they needed to take a look at next year as far as financial flexibility so they can build around Tatum and Brown again. And so I think that's why the move was made. And because of that decision, I do think it's going to be harder for them to bring in a ball handler via trade. They'll probably be on the buyout market for somebody or somebody from the development league because I don't think they want to go back into the apron. So, yeah, well, I believe this is probably the team with them trying to dump Boucher's salary. I don't see anything else happening by Thursday, Jim. I would think you would agree, right?
Yeah, I mean, if they're just dumping Boucher's t salary to get under the tax, and that could be it, then it would be hard. But if they're using Boucher's contract and maybe like Tillman or something, they could go ahead and find somebody. I'm sure they may look for another ball handler on the trade market. Not a big salary guy. I think they'd prefer a bigger guard. Who that is, I don't know, but I think it's very difficult to find someone on the buyout market. Well, not very difficult, but not something you should depend on at all. I mean, even a guy like Mike Conley, I imagine he'll probably look towards someone like the Rockets, where they're in contention and there will be plenty of playing time for him to slide right in there. Whereas here he'd be the third guard, and if Tatum comes back, there's even less minutes. And as far as like Tatum filling that ball handling role, for sure, but he's not playing every day. I think even if and when he comes back, even if Scouts at 90% sure, you know, if they have, 4 games during the week, Tatum's probably playing in 3. So I think they're going to need another guy. And on top of that, you're one injury away right now from only having one ball handler. So they need someone. So I anticipate they're going to try to make a move between now and the deadline.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough. I know that Cleveland's trying to move ball, but he makes 10 million a year and he hasn't been very good.
Yeah, I think
Um,
that's probably a little high. Yeah, and he's not been
yeah,
very good. This is the other thing. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm not sure what's out there. I maybe they identified a guy, like I said in the G League, that they can try some guys out on 10-day contracts too, where they have an open roster spot. So that's an option that they have as well. Um,
Yep.
yeah, so I think you may see things like that. I don't know where Spencer Dinwiddie playing. He usually gets moved around this time.
I have no idea. Yeah, is he in China now? Like I have really no idea.
Uh,
Um,
I know that Dallas probably wants to move D'Angelo Russell, but he's hurt again. I didn't see him out there playing last night. And so, yeah, I don't know what's out there, but those are the type of guys I'd imagine. Mike
yeah,
Conley is old. He hasn't been very good this year. I wouldn't even want him if I was Houston or Boston, to be honest. Um, I'd rather try younger guys from the G League to see if you can bring somebody up and develop them too. Um, kind of would be. I don't know. There's a guy in Portland right now that's playing well. I have no idea.
yeah. I mean, right now the Bulls. I know you just made a deal with them, but they have
12 guards, yeah.
yeah, about 12 guys on their roster. So I don't know if there's like a guy like Io DeSumo. Is he a guy that might be moved? He's making I think about 7 million a year. So you could find a way with Boucher in a minimum deal and maybe throw a pick, and maybe you can get a guy like that. Um, but I don't know if I can never tell what the Bulls are up to and who's actually going to be moved and who's not. Um, so you can watch out for something like that too.
And I know if guy you don't really like, but if Sacramento is unable to trade
Oh
DeMar
no,
DeRozan,
you're not
DeMar
good.
DeRozan, he's gonna be stretched and bought out, and I don't know how many teams are even able to sign him that are in the position the Celtics are in. So
Yeah, I don't
it'll,
know. I thought
it'll
you
be
were
up
going to say. I thought you were going to say Westbrook. I was like, come
No,
on.
I mean, Westbrook's the name that's been brought up, but DeRozan, he's still, an efficient scorer, 20 something a game. He doesn't really defend, um, handle the ball, and I think it's going to be hard to move that contract for Sacramento. I don't see a lot of teams wanting to trade for him, and they came out and said, we're going to buy him out and let him go try to play for a contender. So I'm sure there'll be a market for him for the teams that aren't in that apron to bring him in.
Yeah, I don't think there'd be a lot of minutes for him here, so it'd be interesting if you want to come here, and he certainly wouldn't be a primary scoring option. But maybe beggars can't be choosers, and they're going to need somebody. Um,
Yeah, and he's still a great fourth
I
quarter player and
yeah
clutch minutes. So he'll help somebody. He'll end up
yeah
somewhere.
oh, yeah. I mean, yeah. I guess. How old is he now? Like 37?
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's 37. He still plays every day. Um, and he still scores over 20 points a game.
Yeah. I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not a big DeRozan guy, but I guess that could be an option. I just think the buyout market's probably not the way you want to go, because it's really the crumbs that are out there at that point, and I
I think
think I'd
I'd
rather
rather
the
them
G League
go.
stuff like you talked about than anything in
Yeah.
the buyout. Yeah.
I'd rather G League guys or crumbs than trading away assets for this year. I just don't think that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it depends on who it is, and is it a guy that has years left on his contract after this year, and or a guy you might look to retain. So we'll see. There were some other moves, Mike. We got about 5 minutes left. Harden for Darius Garland, popped up. That happened pretty quickly. I don't even know when we recorded the pod if Harden had demanded his trade yet. I don't think he had. So that developed within about 48 hours or less, and all of a sudden that move was made. Jared Jackson Jr. going out to Utah. Um,
Yeah.
it sounds like Utah's not done yet, potentially at the deadline. Utah, bunch of picks involved with that. Some guys moving in different spots as well, but the big name is Jaren Jackson Jr. Any thoughts on any of these moves from yesterday?
Yeah, I think Cleveland's trying to contend now. And Garland and Mitchell, the smallest backcourt in the NBA, clearly doesn't work. And Garland also doesn't play because he's always hurt. Um, One thing you can say about Harden is he plays. Last 2 years, he's played 70 more games. He's on that pace again this year, and he's bigger. He's long. He's big. Um, he has his playoff woes, but put it this way, that's a backcourt that you have to plan for in the playoffs. You have to game plan for James Harden. He still scores 25 a game. Um, he's still shooting a high clip from three, and defensively, he can switch on to power forwards. So I think Cleveland knows that they need to try to win now. That this mix of players, after getting bounced by Indiana the way they got bounced last year, isn't going to work. They're only a half a game out of the second seed, so why not? Um, and I'd also imagine that they must be re-upping Harden. That must be part of this because he was already complaining in LA that they didn't re-up his contract. You know how things can get with him quickly. So that'll be interesting. Does James Harden play hard or does he bitch and complain and destroy the team? So that'll be a good storyline to keep an eye on.
Cleveland's actually 2.5 games out. You mentioned that yesterday. Both them and the Raptors are 2.5 games out of second place. They're not a half game. But Harden's a quitter, and he's a loser. He quits and loses wherever he goes. I expect the same exact thing to happen here. I wouldn't trade 2 quarters on the dollar for the guy. I think this is a bad trade for Cleveland. Despite everything you're saying, he never ever shows up in the playoffs, and then next year he's going to demand a trade from Cleveland. There hasn't been a spot that he's gone to where he hasn't made extraordinary demands from the team, and then when they're not all met, he looks to get traded. Game seven in Philadelphia against Boston, he showed up with 9 points. Game seven last year against the Nuggets, he didn't even look at the fucking rim. And then, as soon as the team starts playing well out there in LA and it looks like they're turning the corner, he demands to be traded because not all his demands are being met. I understand looking out for yourself. The guy's a quitter and a loser. He will quit on Cleveland eventually, and he will show up as a loser in the playoffs. This has been, it's like a ticking clock. You know where it's going to go. And that's exactly what James Harden is. So if Cleveland felt like they needed to do something to shake up their roster, well, you did it. I'm not sure what this does for you outside of maybe helps you in the regular season. You will not go anywhere with this guy. And that's been proven over and over and over again. And that's my 2 cents on it. I would not want this guy on my team under any circumstances. And good luck to the fans that have to cheer for him.
They weren't going anywhere with Darius Garland either, though. I mean, and they didn't have a lot of options. It's not like
But he's not.
they were in a position, Jim, where they can't even aggregate contracts.
I don't think there's any way to defend bringing in James Harden. I'm just sorry. I just don't think there is.
I do. I mean, he played really well last year. He led that.
How did he do in the playoffs?
Yeah, but he's not the main
And then
guy.
what did he do in the following season? He demanded a trade.
Yeah, he demanded a trade.
When has it?
He demanded a trade, but he's only in Cleveland for half a season. He's only there to try to win this year. That's like so if you were the GM of Cleveland, you would have just not done anything at the trade deadline and stuck with Darius Garland, who doesn't
That's not
play?
what I'm saying. I would not trade for James Harden.
Yeah, but they didn't have it. So then you would have done nothing. You would have done nothing.
Well,
because there was no move.
Why is that the only move? Jared Jackson got moved. Like there's moves to be made.
Who are they? What move you have to trade Darius Garland straight up for one guy? And they
why do you have to do that? Why is
because
that
you have the smallest. You have the smallest.
So you're the entire roster of the Cleveland Cavaliers. There's no other moves to be made. Is what you're telling me. The only move in the NBA is to bring in the biggest loser in the NBA.
I think it's a risk you have to take. Yeah, the guy is an all-star player. He's a talented player.
Okay. Yeah. I guess. Good luck to you. If that's what you're putting your chips on, you're pushing all your chips in on this guy. Good luck. He has never shown up when it matters. Never. And now all of a sudden in year 20 or whatever he's in, he's going to show up. I mean, come on.
Showing up. He led the Houston Rockets to Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals.
Okay.
He got him there.
He's a quitter and he's a loser, and it's about James Harden all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. It's the same story with Kyrie Irving, but sometimes these guys show up.
Yeah.
Dallas got to the NBA Finals because they took a risk. Sometimes we bashed that trade when it happened. We bashed it, and it didn't blow up in their face. Like sometimes you don't have options. You have to take a risk.
I think there's other options for Cleveland other than this. The idea that there's no other options around the league, and if they back themselves into the corner that this was their only one, then.
Well, I think that's part of the problem with the way the salary structures of the NBA are set up. The way it is impossible to make significant trades. I mean, you talk about they can make minor moves, but they're still stuck with that poison pill contract to Darius Garland, the guy who doesn't play, who's undersized, in the same backcourt with another undersized guard who's starting to get hurt. I just, I don't hate the move because of where they're at. They have to do something. And that's, that's what they're doing.
I guess we'll see. I don't think it's going to get him anywhere. Yeah, and he's a free agent. They can decide whether they want to re-sign him. But I don't think it's going to get him anywhere. And
All right.
it also bothers me that this guy continues to be able to just shoot his way out of town. It's just
Yeah, I mean that's a story in itself. I'm just talking about the basketball and structure wise. It's not a lot people can do in these situations.
yeah. We'll see
Yeah.
how it goes. I don't think it's going to go well. Um. All right, Jaren Jackson Jr. Any thoughts before we jump off?
Um, yeah, I mean Utah's, I guess, trying to get better. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, that's they're like what they have like 16 wins this year. So he went from one bad team to another, and he went to a worse city. That's really cold. So I'm sure he's pumped.
It's interesting. Like they're starting five, you can see some talent developing there when Keontae George and Markkanen, and now him. We'll see what they do with Kessler, but there's some serious size within that
Yeah.
starting five. There's definitely scoring. They didn't have any defense, and now Jackson gives them that. I think it was worth for them to roll the dice. They still have draft picks that they can make moves on, so you'd be interested to see if they bring in somebody else. Utah, you had to try to do something, so I don't think this was a terrible one.
No, I think it was a good move for Utah. They don't draft well, so they might as well move their draft picks.
Yeah,
Um, I don't. I'm not a big Ace Bailey guy. He hasn't looked great compared to these other rookies.
no, he hasn't.
Um, did you see their point guard last night had 22 assists? Collier.
Utah's did.
Yeah,
Oh wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
22 assists last night. But yeah, I think it's a great. I mean, and obviously Memphis, they were saying like the most draft picks over the next 3 years or something. So they're obviously full rebuild with a guy who likes to like play with guns still on the roster. So
Yeah, we'll see what happens with them. I wonder if he gets moved between now and tomorrow. Um, all right, Mike. So we'll pay attention to what happens with the Celtics. Nice win against the Mavericks.
go
Interesting
us.
game tonight against the Rockets to see how they respond on a back-to-back. Not a great
Yeah,
matchup at all for the Celtics to begin with. So
no,
um, we'll see how it goes. I think Kevin Durant's questionable, so if he's out, that would help. But we'll see how it goes. Any closing thoughts?
yeah, Brown looked awesome last night. Go Seas.
All right. Talk to everyone soon.
What the fuck is this world? Run to you today. Leave a message on the star. Curl on your horse one last time. Daily my field is good. Be my time by you. Would you hit me? Would you hit me? Oh, oh, oh.